everyone, my name is Erica Wood and I'm from the Hopkins County Extension Office, and I'm back with another video. And today I'm going to talk about this lovely little house plant here, and that is the ZZ plant, otherwise known as Zamioculcas zamiofolia. And the ZZ plant is just another wonderful beginner plant that I would recommend for those who either just need easygoing, low maintenance house plants, or those who are just really new to their journey of just gardening and growing plants. The ZZ plant is a really great option for them. So just to start out with, the ZZ plant originates from Africa, and you honestly can treat this kind of like a succulent. You know, this is a plant that just really thrives on neglect. In all honesty, it really doesn't need a lot of attention, and in all honesty, watering. So let's kind of get into that. So with this plant, this is something that you're going to be maybe watering once every few weeks to potentially even once a month. This is not one that you're going to be watering like every single week. And the reason being, and I'm going to kind of get a little dirty here, I'm going to take this guy out of the pot. Okay. So the cool thing about the ZZ plant is it has almost like, I kind of describe it as a potato. It has this tuberous growth, kind of this tuber-like storage structure with the roots, where it stores like its water and nutrients, of course, things like that it needs to survive periods of drought. And so, you know, of course, whenever you're growing this or planting this, don't cut this off by any means. Just keep it on there. But with that, this plant really is not going to be watered as frequently because it can actually store a lot of the water already. And so since it's kind of adapted to these kind of low watering drought-like conditions, then as a result, you don't need to water it very often. And in fact, if you water it too much, this tuber-like growth may end up rotting away and even resulting in potentially the death of the ZZ plant. And really, that's kind of the number one problem with people taking care of ZZ plants, is they actually tend to overwater it to the point where the leaves will really start to yellow and then fall. And then if you were to dig this up, it just kind of would get these mushy tubers and these mushy leaves, and it's just not ideal at all. So again, you're not going to need to water this very often. And something that I would recommend too is keeping it to like a terracotta clay pot, where if you were to accidentally give it too much water, then that clay can kind of absorb some of that excess water away from this root system. So that's just kind of something, you know, the biggest thing with ZZ plants. So again, you're not going to have to water it very often. You may have to water it more if it's like in a smaller pot where it's like incredibly root bound and there's really just not much soil substance left. But especially if you just recently repotted this and it's in a bigger container, it's definitely not going to need to be watered very often. So that's good. So with that in mind, perfect for people who tend to underwater their plants or tend to forget about their plants. So let's talk about a couple other things. So you've noticed with the ZZ plant, it has these very lovely, deep, glossy green leaves. And actually, when new leaves start to sprout, they're usually a lighter green color, and then they start to darken with maturity. And you may even see some new cultivars on the market, such as ZZ Raven, where actually it has this pitch black foliage, and then the new growth is kind of a lime green color that then fades to black as it matures. So very unique growth on this plant. And I should mention, with it kind of having that like thicker glossy leaf, this can actually tolerate higher light conditions. Now, here's the thing. Most people are going to grow ZZ plants in low light, and that's because it can tolerate it. It can survive it. There's actually been, like, I've seen like some little like studies done where people will put plants like in a closet, a dark closet for like weeks on end, and they see like what plant is still alive after that. And the ZZ plant always tends to be the victor, it seems. And so, yes, can this plant grow in low light conditions? Absolutely. And really, as a result of growing in low light, you definitely need to water it less and less, because it's not going to need as much water because it's not going to be growing as fast. So that's the other thing. That's kind of the downside to growing in low light, is it may not sprout for you, like it may not sprout newer growth. It may be slower growth. And eventually even like the leaves might become a little bit like elongated overall, just because they're trying to find sunlight. But it can, again, it can still survive and tolerate those lower light conditions. However, if you want to give this plant ideal conditions, definitely choose to put it in bright light. This plant can thrive, honestly, in like a south or west facing window where it's getting so much bright afternoon light, and the leaves can tolerate it. They can take that light in. You don't necessarily have to worry about scorched leaves indoors, because this plant's going to grow faster and better. It's going to sprout more leaves in that higher light. So more light the better, but it's not totally understandable if you just want to have some greenery in a lower light setting or even an office setting. A ZZ plant is a good option because of how well it can survive that environment. You really otherwise don't need to worry about humidity with this plant. It's going to do well regardless. In general, fertilizer, sure, could you fertilize like in the spring and summer months? Yes, but it's not going to really need a whole lot. And especially if you're putting in a potting mix that has like a controlled release fertilizer already in it, then it's probably going to be fine. So primarily you're growing this as a foliage plant. Now this can bloom. It is in the aroid family, and it produces that spathe and spadix structure that's typical of aroids. But honestly, I don't really see that flower very often, unless, in all honesty, it's really stressed and it's kind of putting out a flower as a last ditch effort for survival. Or two, it could be doing that like if it's just really root bound, which honestly, if it's really root bound and kind of breaking out of the pot, that could be another sign of stress, of course, too. So really, we're not typically looking at the blooms or seeing the blooms, probably even going to cut the bloom off, in all honesty. So yeah, but otherwise, really a good, again, easygoing beginner house plant. You can divide this, propagate it a number of ways. So you can kind of, if you're buying this from the store, more than likely you have multiple plants that you can kind of divide out those potato-like tubers and separate it, kind of like this. Or you can do leaf or stem propagations. So you can, cut a stem off and root it, whether it be in water or in soil. Or you can even, if you can get the whole leaf off with the tiny little petiole that's attached to it, even the leaf can eventually propagate as well. But let me tell you, when it comes to propagation, this is so slow. So you're really going to have to be patient when it comes to establishing roots, and even more patient when it eventually gets new sprouts on it. So propagation can definitely take a long time for this plant, but it is possible. Other than that, that'll about do it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.